Oh, the referee's hand slammed against the canvas for the third time, and Muhammad Ali's world went silent. Blood trickled from his split lip as he lay motionless on the Madison Square Garden floor, the overhead lights burning white-hot above him. 20,000 people held their breath, but it wasn't the count that made him open his eyes. It was the absolute crushing silence from the crowd. No cheers, no boos, just the sound of his own heartbeat echoing in his ears like a war drum. Ali's vision blurred as he pushed himself up on his elbows. The taste of copper filled his mouth, and his left shoulder screamed in protest from the brutal combination that had dropped him. Across the ring, his opponent, a young heavyweight from Detroit named Marcus "Thunder" Williams, stood in the neutral corner, gloves raised, waiting for the inevitable celebration. The kid was good, real good, and at 34, Ali was supposed to be finished. "Stay down, champ," someone whispered from ringside. Ali couldn't see who, but the voice cut through the fog in his head like a blade. "You got nothing left to prove." The referee, a grizzled veteran named Tommy Morrison, crouched beside him. "You okay, Muhammad? Can you continue?" Morrison's eyes held genuine concern. They'd worked together for years, and Morrison had seen fighters take beatings that changed them forever. Ali's legs trembled as he found his footing. The canvas felt like quicksand beneath his feet. He nodded to Morrison, wiping blood from his nose with the back of his glove. The crowd remained eerily quiet, as if they were witnessing something sacred or tragic. "I'm good," Ali mumbled, though his words came out slurred. "I'm good, Tommy." Morrison studied his face for what felt like an eternity. "You sure about this?" Before Ali could answer, the bell rang for round 8. Williams came out swinging, his youth and hunger evident in every movement. Ali backpedaled, his famous footwork reduced to a desperate shuffle. The ropes caught him, and Williams unleashed a flurry of body shots that folded Ali in half. But something strange happened in that moment of pain. As Williams stepped back to admire his work, Ali heard it, a single voice from the upper deck. An old man, probably in his 70s, shouting with everything he had, "Get up, Muhammad! My grandson needs to see this!" Ali's head snapped up. Through the sweat and blood, he scanned the crowd until he found the source. There, in section 312, an elderly black man stood with a boy who couldn't have been more than 8 years old. The kid wore an Ali t-shirt that was 3 sizes too big, his eyes wide with terror and hope. The silence broke like a dam bursting. 20,000 people erupted, not in celebration of Williams' dominance, but in desperate encouragement for their fallen hero. "Ali! Ali! Ali!" The chant started somewhere in the cheap seats and spread like wildfire through the arena. Williams charged again, but this time Ali was ready. He slipped the first punch, ducked the second, and landed a sharp jab that stopped the young fighter in his tracks. It wasn't the hardest punch Ali had ever thrown, but it carried something Williams wasn't prepared for: 34 years of refusing to quit. The round ended with both fighters standing, and as Ali walked to his corner, he caught sight of his trainer, Angelo Dundee, shaking his head in disbelief. Angelo had been with him since the beginning, through 3 heavyweight championships and more wars than either man cared to count. "What the hell was that?" Angelo demanded as Ali slumped onto the stool. "You were out on your feet and then, did you see that kid?" Ali interrupted, his breathing labored, but his eyes clear for the first time all night. Section 312, "Little boy in my shirt." Angelo followed Ali's gaze to the upper deck, where the old man and his grandson were still on their feet, the boy now jumping up and down with excitement. "Yeah, I see him." "So what?" "So everything," Ali said, accepting the water bottle Angelo offered. "That's why I'm here, Angelo. Not for the money, not for the title, for kids like that who need to know that getting knocked down ain't the same as staying down." Angelo worked on the cut above Ali's left eye, his hands steady despite his obvious frustration. "Muhammad, you're 34 years old. You've got nothing left to prove to anybody. That kid will understand if you—" "No, he won't," Ali cut him off. Because I wouldn't understand, and neither would you. The warning buzzer sounded for round 9. As Ali stood up, he felt something he hadn't experienced in months. Not just the desire to win, but the absolute certainty that he would. Williams was younger, stronger, hungrier, but he'd never been knocked down by life and forced to get back up. He'd never had to choose between comfort and purpose. Ali walked to the center of the ring, where Williams waited with the confidence of a man who thought the fight was already over. The referee gave his instructions, but Ali wasn't listening. His attention was fixed on section 312, where the old man had lifted his grandson onto his shoulders so the boy could see better. The bell rang for round 9, and Williams came out like a man possessed. But Ali was no longer the same fighter who had been dropped in round 7. He moved with purpose now, each step calculated, each punch thrown with the weight of every person who had ever believed in him. Williams landed a solid right hand that would have finished most fighters, but Ali absorbed it and kept coming forward. The crowd sensed the shift in momentum and rose to their feet as one. This wasn't just a boxing match anymore. It was a testament to the power of refusing to accept defeat. With 30 seconds left in the round, Ali landed a combination that sent Williams stumbling backward. The young fighter's legs wobbled, and for the first time all night, doubt crept into his eyes. Ali pressed forward, but the bell saved Williams from further punishment. As the fighters returned to their corners, Ali looked up at section 312 one more time. The old man was crying now, tears streaming down his weathered face as he held his grandson tight. The boy was pointing at Ali and saying something that made the old man smile through his tears. Angelo was talking, giving instructions for round 10, but Ali's mind was elsewhere. He was thinking about his own grandfather, who had died when Ali was just 12 years old. The old man had been a sharecropper in Kentucky, a man who had never owned anything, but had somehow managed to pass down something more valuable than money. The unshakable belief that a person's worth wasn't determined by how many times they fell, but by how many times they got back up. The bell rang for round 10, and Ali walked to the center of the ring with the weight of generations on his shoulders. Williams came out swinging, but his punches lacked the conviction they'd carried earlier. He was fighting a ghost now, battling not just Muhammad Ali, but every person who had ever refused to stay down when life knocked them flat. Ali's jab found its mark again and again, each punch a statement of intent. Williams tried to clinch, to buy himself time, but Ali pushed him away and continued his assault. The crowd was on its feet now, sensing that they were witnessing something special, not just a comeback, but a resurrection. With 1 minute left in the round, Ali landed a right hand that sent Williams to the canvas. The young fighter got up at the count of 8, but his legs were gone. Ali moved in for the finish, but something made him pause. He looked into Williams' eyes and saw something familiar, the same desperation he'd felt just 3 rounds earlier. Instead of going for the knockout, Ali stepped back and let Williams recover. The crowd booed, confused by his restraint, but Ali knew what he was doing. This wasn't about destroying a young man's dreams. It was about proving that getting back up was always possible, no matter how hard you'd been hit. The round ended with both fighters standing, and as they walked to their corners, Williams nodded at Ali with newfound respect. The young fighter had learned something valuable tonight, that true strength wasn't about never falling down, but about what you did after you hit the canvas. In his corner, Angelo was beside himself. "What are you doing out there? You had him finished." Ali smiled, his face battered but his spirit unbroken. "I'm teaching, Angelo. That boy up there, Williams, everyone watching, they need to see that the fight ain't over until you decide it's over." The bell rang for round 11, and both fighters met in the center of the ring with mutual respect. They fought hard for 3 more rounds, neither man giving an inch, both drawing strength from the crowd's energy and their own refusal to quit. When the final bell rang, both fighters embraced in the center of the ring. The judges' scorecards were irrelevant. Everyone in Madison Square Garden knew they had witnessed something transcendent. Ali had lost the fight on points, but he had won something far more valuable. As he made his way to the dressing room, Ali stopped at ringside and gestured for the old man and his grandson to come down from section 312. Security tried to intervene, but Ali waved them off. The old man carried his grandson through the crowd, both of them beaming with joy. "What's your name, young man?" Ali asked the boy, kneeling down to meet him at eye level. "Timothy," the boy whispered, suddenly shy in the presence of his hero. "Well, Timothy, did you learn anything tonight?" The boy nodded eagerly. "You got knocked down, but you got back up." Ali smiled, his split lips stretching painfully. "That's right. And you know what? Someday, life's gonna knock you down too. But when it happens, you remember tonight. You remember that getting back up is always a choice." The old man extended his hand to Ali. "Thank you," he said simply. "His parents died in a car accident last year. He's been living with me, and he's been having nightmares, afraid to try anything because he might fail. Tonight, you showed him something I couldn't teach him with words." Ali shook the man's hand, then pulled both him and Timothy into a hug. "We all need reminders sometimes," he said. "Tonight you two reminded me why I do this." As Ali finally made his way to the dressing room, he felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned to see Marcus Williams, still in his boxing gear, his face showing the effects of their battle. "I wanted to thank you," Williams said, "for what you did in round 10. You could have finished me, but you didn't." Ali studied the young fighter's face. "You got heart, son, real heart, but heart without wisdom is just stubbornness. Tonight, you learned the difference." Williams nodded, understanding passing between them. "Will you train with me sometime? I mean, if you're not too busy being a legend and all." Ali laughed, the sound echoing through the corridor. "Legends are just people who refuse to quit, Marcus. And yeah, I'd be honored to work with you." In the dressing room, Angelo was waiting with ice packs and a bottle of painkillers. "So, was it worth it?" he asked as he began treating Ali's cuts. Ali looked at himself in the mirror. His face was swollen, his body ached, and he'd lost the fight on the scorecards. But his eyes held a light that hadn't been there in months. "Angelo, you ever notice how quiet it gets right before something important happens?" Angelo paused in his work. "What do you mean?" "Tonight, when I was down on that canvas, the whole world went silent. 20,000 people, and I couldn't hear a sound. But then that old man started shouting, and everything changed. Sometimes you need the silence to hear what really matters." Angelo finished with the ice pack and sat down beside his fighter. "So what happens now?" Ali stood up slowly, his body protesting every movement. Now I go home to my family. I hug my kids. I tell them about tonight, about how getting knocked down taught me something I'd forgotten." "Which is?" Ali smiled, picking up his gym bag. "That the fight's never really about winning or losing. It's about who you become while you're fighting." As they left Madison Square Garden, Ali could hear the crowd still buzzing with excitement. Fans lined the exit, hoping for autographs and photos. But Ali's attention was drawn to a small group near the stage door, Timothy and his grandfather, waiting patiently with a worn notebook and a pen. Ali walked over to them, ignoring the larger crowd. "What's this?" he asked, pointing to the notebook. "It's my journal," Timothy said. "Grandpa says I should write down important things so I don't forget them." "Smart grandpa," Ali said, taking the notebook and pen. He wrote for several minutes, his hand moving carefully across the page. When he finished, he handed it back to Timothy. The boy read aloud, "Dear Timothy, tonight you saw a man get knocked down and get back up. But the real lesson isn't about boxing. It's about life. Every day you'll face things that try to knock you down. Fear, doubt, other people's opinions, your own mistakes. The secret isn't to never fall. The secret is to remember that the canvas isn't your home. Getting back up is always a choice, and it's always the right choice. Your friend, Muhammad Ali." Timothy looked up at Ali with tears in his eyes. "I'll never forget this." "Good," Ali said, ruffling the boy's hair, "because someday you're gonna need to remember it." As Ali walked away, he could hear Timothy reading the message again to his grandfather. The old man's voice carried on the night air. "See, boy, that's what a champion looks like, not because he never falls, but because he always gets back up." The next morning, Ali woke up in his hotel room, feeling like he'd been hit by a truck. Every muscle in his body ached, and his face looked like a road map of the previous night's battle. But when he turned on the television, he saw something that made all the pain worthwhile. The sports news was covering the fight, but the focus wasn't on Williams' victory or Ali's defeat. Instead, they were showing footage of Ali with Timothy and his grandfather, talking about the power of perseverance and the importance of getting back up after being knocked down. The phone in his room rang. It was Angelo. "You see the news?" Angelo asked. "Yeah, I'm watching it now." "Muhammad, I've been your trainer for 15 years, and I've never seen anything like what happened last night. You lost the fight, but somehow you won something bigger." Ali smiled, wincing as the movement pulled at his split lip. "You know what the funny thing is, Angelo? I went into that ring thinking I had something to prove. Turns out, I had something to learn. Which was that the crowd's silence wasn't telling me to stay down. It was giving me space to remember who I am." 3 weeks later, Ali received a letter in the mail. The return address showed it was from Timothy's grandfather. Inside was a photo of Timothy at a school science fair, standing next to a project about famous comebacks in history. The boy was smiling proudly, holding a blue ribbon. The letter read, "Dear Muhammad, Timothy won first place at his science fair. His project was about people who got knocked down and got back up. He interviewed his teacher, the school principal, and 3 other kids who had failed at something and tried again. He said he learned that getting back up isn't just about boxing, it's about everything. Thank you for teaching an old man and his grandson that champions aren't made in the ring. They're made in the moments when nobody's watching and everything hurts, but you choose to stand up anyway. Your friend, William Thompson." Ali folded the letter carefully and put it in his wallet, right next to a photo of his own children. That afternoon, he called Marcus Williams and invited him to train at his gym in Pennsylvania. The young fighter accepted immediately. 6 months later, Williams would win his first major championship, dedicating the victory to "the man who taught me that losing a fight doesn't mean losing your heart." And in Section 312 of Madison Square Garden, during Williams' title fight, an old man and his grandson would be cheering, both of them wearing T-shirts that read, "Getting back up is always a choice." But that night, as Ali sat in his hotel room with ice on his swollen face and pain radiating through his body, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years: complete peace. He had been knocked down, literally and figuratively, and he had gotten back up. Not because he had to, but because he chose to. And in that choice, he had rediscovered not just his purpose as a fighter, but his purpose as a human being. The silence that had terrified him on the canvas had become his teacher. In that moment of absolute quiet, with 20,000 people holding their breath, he had heard the only voice that truly mattered, his own, telling him that the fight wasn't over until he decided it was over. And Muhammad Ali, battered and beaten but unbroken, had decided that his fight was far from over. If you made it this far and felt every word, you won't leave without subscribing, will you? I tell these stories with my heart in my hands, to reach people like you, who feel, who get emotional, who live. If this truly touched you, give back, comment, subscribe. Come be part of this family with me until the next video.